I went to the Bothan Club and heard Miles Davis with Ron and Herbie and Tony, and I heard Tony Williams. That was the first time I heard him live. And he was playing so loud you could hardly hear the band. But somehow or another, if you stayed with it for a while, then you could hear the band. It took a minute. You could hear, it seemed like the whole band was playing inside of his right cymbal. And at that point, he was no longer playing like Four and More. He was playing all of those jagged, really out raw ideas that he started doing around the Miles Smiles time period, or Miles in the Sky, or whenever the Sorcerer. He was opened way up more, and a lot of the bebop language would be in here and there, but you had to listen. You had to wait for him to spring it on you because it wasn't as apparent as the Four and More time period was. And for all of you drum buffs out there, he had a 22 behind the hi-hat, as well as the 22 in a regular position, an 18 crash, and behind the hi-hat he had a 22, and he'd reach his arm underneath like this and play the 22. I don't know if you can see this, and he'd play with his right arm underneath his left arm. And in those days, there were no stick bags or cymbal bags, so all the cymbals were there and the sticks and everything, and he played a Gretsch Sonny Payne 3D. That's how he got that nice click on those cymbals. And there was a pile of wood. He played so hard that there was wood shavings underneath his floor tom where he was kicking all that butt. You know what I mean? From the sticks being all chewed up. And the sticks looked like a dog had got a hold of him and chewed him in the middle. And the bead was worn off, a whole lot of them. So one day, though, after I got to know him a little bit, I didn't know him well, he called me at 10 a.m. and said, "Mike, can you come up to my house?" And I said, "Well, it's kind of early." I didn't wake up. I was one of those musicians that I'd work late and sleep till 1 o'clock. But it was Tony Williams, so I got up and I went right to his house. When I got in there, he had drum furniture, bass drum table, bass drum case, coffee table, and a few, but he had some nice stuff. It was a nice place. But he had that big yellow Gretsch kit semi-assembled. Like, I can't remember, it was a long time ago, but I remember all the toms weren't up and everything. It was just sitting there and facing the wall. And he said, "Will you play for me?" "Play for me." Not will you play for me. He said, "Play for me." And I went, "Really?" And he went, "Okay." I said, "Okay." So I sat down. First thing, I looked in his trap case, and there was a bunch of broken sticks, a couple of cigars smashed out in there, tons of wood chips and rusted hi-hat and cymbal tilters. So that made me feel good. I went, like, this guy's like me. I see him as a god, but he's not that much different than me, So when I started playing that set, it sounded so much like him. We all have our Tony licks that we play. So I have some half-baked Tony, so I started throwing down on that right in front of him. I didn't even care because I got so enthralled by the drum set. I started like on the toms. And he's such a cool cat. He goes like this. No, man. He called me a name I'm not going to say. No, man. He goes like, "Don't play my shit. Play that funky shit you play." And so I did. And he went, "Yeah." And then he cleaned up the front part of his house in the kitchen. And then he went, and he waved his hand and he went, "Stop. And I did. And he said, "I just needed some inspiration, thanks," and put me out, man. He used to, when he was young, he lived in Harlem, and he played quarter notes really as fast as he could, all unisons with each part of his body, every hand and every foot, boom, 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 as fast as he could and as loud as he could. And he would do that like, I don't know, a half hour or who knows, but something he told me like that. But that was part of his routine way back. He came up with so much innovative stuff. His cymbal beat was like on fire. It was like a fire dance, like I've never heard before or since. It wasn't the laid-back tripletized thing, or however people want to talk about it. I don't know the numbers so well. I hear people use that word, but it just had so much fire and such a dance. He introduced the 4/4 thing on the hi-hat. I mean, I'd heard Gene Krupa do that, but I don't even know whether Gene knew he was doing that. His foot was maybe just kind of flailing along, I'm not sure. Or maybe he did, but it wasn't used in the same way. He also displaced the hi-hat all over the place. Also, Elvin did that too, but Tony really made a big deal about it. He treated each drum as a separate instrument instead of, his phrasing was so choppy and different, and he spit things out. He listened. It sounded like he was making a sound to whatever other people's sounds were making. Like he'd hear something, a counterpuncher, and then he'd make a statement according to what was going on, and it didn't have to be the regular old zat dat da da da. He was in no hurry. He didn't seem to feel any pressure to prove he could play bebop, although it's all up in there. But it was a different take on it. Tony stacked rhythm on top of rhythm, and it was very thick. And a lot of guys are used to, they'd rather have a one-armed drummer just play some straight time. And I don't disrespect that. I can understand it. Maybe for some people's style, it would get in their way. But Tony was like a communicative drummer, where he listened to everything that was going on, even though he played what people call loud. To me, it wasn't all that loud. He was just kicking some ass. He's a butt-kicking drummer. It's just, it's like, guys cry about that. I'm like, well, then, play the violin, bro. Or don't whine, go get some warm milk. I really can't deal with that, because the dude swung his butt off. He played raw. He had all that beautiful technique, but it was nasty and open and guttural. I think he as a human being demanded respect, and hence then so is his drumming. It came from him, what he did. So, yeah, I'm sure that, like all drummers, he's been treated, don't do this, don't do that, by people who don't know the instrument and don't want to swing that hard. Like, if you don't want to swing that hard, why hire a guy like that? A lot of people don't like to swing that hard, but they'll tell you that they really swing their butts off. That's bullshit, man. That's an old dance. I've heard it for years. Do that to a guy that's 21. Tell him that, but you can't tell me that. And I read where you could tell this guy was a young guy that didn't know the history, and he was like, that ride cymbal sounds really kind of, I forget the word he used, I think it was rough, but it was something like coarse. He didn't understand the fire and the grit and the soul behind it. Maybe this guy's a rock drummer or a fusion drummer, doesn't get the language or doesn't understand what that ride cymbal means to a lot of us. To a lot of us, that ride cymbal means what it means. You know what I mean? To those of us it means, that means all. You know what I mean? Like I say, that dance he did was so wicked that I don't dare try to duplicate. It sounds stupid if I try to go there. And I do try to go there sometimes. You can't help but play some Tony stuff because it's part of the history. And if you play a fast tempo, and even if you try to play some stuff out of Philly, you're going to end up kind of sounding like Tony anyway, a little bit, but Think of all the drummers, myself included, that has been influenced by this guy, man. Like everybody after he came out with Miles, every drummer, I'm not going to say every drummer, but, I'm not going to name them, but all the influential drummers of the 70s came out of Tony. They came out of other guys too, but Tony was the man. Each thing that he did, when Lifetime came out, everybody started copying that, hence Mahavishnu, right? Then after that, when Believe It came out, everybody started playing like that. Everybody started playing open hi-hat rock and playing licks like that. And there's a million drummers I heard that copped and made a career out of that. So maybe he didn't get the money he should have, but he certainly got a lot of recognition. Like every time he would change up, everybody else would change up. Check that out. He's like Picasso, man. I mean, this guy is like, there's only one Tony Williams. He's one of the greatest jazz musicians we've ever had, and maybe ever will have. One time I saw him about 6 a.m. I was coming home from a gig and a date, and it was 6 a.m. And I rolled into this one little store where you could buy cereal and stuff for the morning that was open all night. And he was in there at 6 a.m. with his green jumpsuit on, chomping on a cigar. He had his jumpsuit on. He looked just like the back of those downbeat or modern drummer ads, and then sometimes I'd see him walking around town with this yellow jumpsuit on, and people would be looking. This is San Rafael, California. They don't know what a yellow jumpsuit is, man. You know what I mean? In those days, so people would be like, "Wow, look at that guy." I contacted Lenny. I'm like, please explain. I mean, is it true? What? I mean, no, it was huge. And then for the community, it was just devastating. I mean, people were talking about it for a year. Nobody could believe it. And then I think there was, I forget the story, but like the operation went bad, or his wife was going to sue the hospital and they didn't do this. Or a gallbladder operation can be weird and it can affect the heart if they don't do certain things. My mother had a gallbladder, and they were worried about something like this happening. I remember it was a discussion about it. So I don't know what really happened, but I think something went awry. But I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, I still feel weird about it now. It's still heavy for me. Tony Williams. I mean, and plus, there's a lot of guys with a lot of crazy radical drumming technique, but where's the music? The whole thing was like a giant orchestration from his first recording until he passed. So there's nobody to fill that space right now that I know about. There's a lot of great drummers, and I'm not saying nobody plays any music in one of those bitter, well, so-and-so's got a lot of chops, but he can't. I hate that kind of talk. But if there's no music there, if it's not interesting for me, I don't care if you can roll with your hi-hat foot faster than Buddy Rich. I don't want to pay $80 to $120 to come out and have a taste and hear that kind of crap. I want to hear some music. I want to hear some music coming from the drums as well. I'd like to hear something new, fresh, and like innovative as Tony Williams. Who's going to come up with a scheme like that? Like maybe a guy is going to come around. This is the Earth, so sooner or later. But I go hear guys and they're blasting all over the set, and it's fun. I don't like that. I'd rather hear it without a band. I'd rather pay the guy $100 and say, play for me for 1 hour and play everything you know as fast as loud as you can. I'm down. But if I'm going to hear a band, then I want to hear some swinging. He changed everything forever, and he's one of the all-time geniuses, a musician, not a drummer, a musician. He's a jazz musician, one of the greatest jazz musicians we've ever had. And I feel blessed and fortunate to be alive at the time where I got to listen to him all the time, whenever I want to, and I can still listen to him. So he left behind all of that information, all of that brilliance, all of that swinging groove that he would do, and he made a lot of drummers a lot of money who copied him or tried to. Nobody could, and they went on to become big names. You're right about that. He should have been like the kind of money that Herbie Hancock makes or somebody like that, but I'm not begrudging Herbie or anybody else. I'm just saying, why not? I mean, Herbie learned so much from Tony. It's crazy. But I mean, the business is different. If you play music that Prince can sing on or something, you're probably going to make more money than if you play what was that one? What am I doing here? Where am I going? All is said in the bed, even if you're wet. Who the hell's going to buy that except guys like us, man? With all that crazy, jagged, insane drumming going on underneath it, man. You got to really love the instrument, and you got to love the music to dig that deep and to go on his trip with it. Maybe not everybody, because he didn't make it obvious all the time. He'd fan the stuff way out, and open it way up. So a lot of people's consciousness, if you're not like beating them over the head with something simple, they can't hang. That being said, imagine what a courageous warrior Tony was to break all those rules all the time. Whatever barrier they put up, he'd smash down. I mean, the guy was brilliant in every way.
Well, I woke up and found that the sound all around was my